Ambassador Riclef Beutin, permanent representative of Germany to the United Nations. Welcome to Al-Arabiya, sir.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you today.
I'd like to start by asking you about the United Nations membership of the Security Council. You have been a non-permanent member about 6 times in the history of the United Nations, and you are possibly going to join again the year 27, 28, if you're successful in the elections, which we expect you to be. What are Germany's priorities if you are to be elected to the Security Council in 27?
As you say, Germany has been on the Security Council a number of times, and we put forward our candidacy again for those 2 years. Germany is a steadfast supporter of the UN system, of the organization, and all it does. If you just look at how we support it, if you take assessed contributions and voluntary contributions, we're the second largest donor and contributor. So hey, we have a great interest in the UN system and that it works efficiently and delivers for people on the ground, that it delivers on all 3 pillars that are in the Charter: peace and security, development, human rights. And on all of those areas, we make a contribution that are going to be priorities. So just by way of example, we held a large meeting in Berlin with the UN system and the Secretary General this May on peacekeeping. We're chairing the Peacekeeping Commission right now. I'm in this position. We're a very large contributor to the development system. And in the different formats on human rights, we're a very steadfast proponent. And in that, we have an interest in reform, that people are talking about the proposals that the Secretary General made, and rightly so, because we need the UN to adapt to the world of the 21st century, first and foremost, but then also to limited funding that is out there with many member states.
Including Germany.
And including a little bit with Germany. We're not an exception. Budgets are getting tighter. Yeah. But we think that we can do as much as we did if we do it right in the UN. So UN reform will be a priority and work on all the 3 pillars that I mentioned.
Does include the Security Council reforms?
It does. We've been a proponent of a larger reform of the Security Council for many, many years in the format that's called G4. But there are other proposals out there, and what we would like to see is this discussion going forward and really ending up in a reform, and this would be part of our proposal as well.
Does Germany believe that the veto right should be removed in the cases of humanitarian issues or human rights violations?
Well, how the veto right is used is a topic of discussion. Just last week we had this debate in the General Assembly. There have been proposals, one very important a few years ago by Liechtenstein that we support very much. There are limits that the Charter lays out on the use of the veto. And I think we should discuss in what cases the veto is used. And one main case where it should not be used, in our view, is when a member of the Security Council is part to a conflict.
I'd like to move to Palestine and Gaza. Germany is taking part in Civil-Military Coordination Center in southern Israel to help monitor the ceasefire, cleaning the war debris, oversee training and logistical support for the planned multinational peacekeeping force. What is the feedback you're getting from there?
Well, first and foremost, let me say that we welcome the adoption of the resolution very much that endorses the plan that President Trump put forward that was discussed with member states in the region because everybody wanted the violence to stop, right? And for the situation to get better for the Palestinian on the ground, but also in a longer term sense to create peace and stability for Israel, for Palestine. And in that sense, it's a very good step. Now, it's a framework that's been put forward by the resolution, and there are many questions that need to be discussed now and implemented. The Board of Peace that is mentioned in it, the stabilization force. And very immediately, how do you increase humanitarian assistance that has been, coming forward a bit more now after the end of the violence, but still by far not enough to really help the people on the ground. And we've been a promoter of this, of humanitarian assistance. We've been for years supporting Palestinian people, Palestinian Authority. We've been a large donor in terms of humanitarian assistance, but we've also been a large proponent of Israel's security and for a political solution and for this two-state solution, as a matter of fact. So we see a chance now with the resolution, the coordination center that you mentioned on civil military affairs that is trying to put these things together. And we hope that the parties, Hamas first and foremost, stick to the phases that are put forward. So phase one, giving back the hostages, and that has happened, but they've not given back all the...
only two are still missing.
Right.
Yes.
So it's not complete. That's what I was going to say. And on the phase two, there's a lot to be discussed. Humanitarian assistance, reconstruction, security situation on the ground. But that is my message, we want to be engaged, and we can be engaged because we have been engaged for years, and we will continue to do that.
Would Germany consider contributing troops to the ISF?
Well, for the moment, we're contributing largely in a humanitarian way. We're contributing already to the EU missions in police that we have. In September, when the minister was here, he was asked the same question, and he said, this is not a question that has to be tackled right now. For the moment, we're not considering this as Germany, but we see the needs, and I think what's first and foremost needed is that countries in the region contribute troops on the ground.
Germany has supported UNRWA since 1952 and has consistently been a top donor to UNRWA. Except, of course, for the freeze period followed the 7th of October attacks. But just now, on November 19th, he abstained on the vote in the General Assembly to withhold the support for extending UNRWA mandate in a preliminary vote. Why is that? And does that mean Germany, when UNRWA gets extended for sure in the General Assembly, would withhold its assistance to UNRWA?
Well, thank you for mentioning, first of all, that we've been for decades a large supporter of UNRWA with all the different things it does in countries in the region. It's not only about Gaza, obviously. We have been a supporter, and we are now, and we will be. The vote on the resolution is a point where we have skepticism on the reforms that UNRWA needs to do. You know, after October 7th, there were cases that came out where individuals, to say the least, were involved in activities with Hamas that are unacceptable. And we have very good reform proposals in the so-called Colonna report that UNRWA is working on to go through and reform itself. And I think this is what we needed. And this is our message. We need for UNRWA to look at its operation and reform itself. But we see the humanitarian needs. And again, Germany has, only since October 7th, 2023, increased humanitarian assistance all through the UN system and organizations by more than 375 million euros. So this is a really large contribution.
I'd like to move to Iran nuclear file. On August 28th of this year, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom reactivated the snapback procedure on Iran, which means imposing the sanctions, the UN sanctions on Iran. But in spite of triggering this mechanism, you continued your diplomatic talks with Iran, seeking a diplomatic solution for the whole situation, continuing. What is the state of play now?
Well, let me take one small step back to exactly the snapback decision that we took.
Yes.
For years, we had been in contact with the Iranians in this format as E3, and on different levels, but political level included. And for years, we did not see enough movement of Iran, and we saw, with regards to all the obligations Iran has from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, from the so-called JCPOA, that it was in breach, and in breach to a degree that is unacceptable of all its obligations. So that's why we triggered And we said, the ministers put out a statement in September, after we triggered the decision for the snapback, that this is closing one chapter, and it's doing all this on a legal basis that was given to us in the JCPOA in the resolution, but it's not the end of diplomacy. So we're ready to talk with Iran. Since then, I think not enough has happened. I can't give you more details,
okay.
but we're open for talks. The Iranians have to come around, and they need to, and this is not disputed, I think, by most member states of the UN, they need to do what is necessary in terms of non-proliferation. And there needs to be explanations on their nuclear program and on the material that they have.
The 400 kilos.
Yes.
Yes. Sudan, Germany was the first country to grant diplomatic recognition to Sudan after it got its independence in 1956, and has been involved in mediation for various conflicts. Is seen as a trusted and honest mediator, and the Sudanese civil society groups urge Germany to take a leading role in ending the war in Sudan. Do you think Germany can do more, especially now that we have a U.S. plan for peace in Sudan?
Well, I think overall more needs to be done to quell this conflict, quell the violence, and find a political solution in Sudan. And this has been going on for years, with a huge toll on human lives. We see news coming out of Sudan, especially Al-Fasher, with mass atrocities that are unspeakable, really. And I think we need action on three strands: political talks, to talk about how this conflict can be put to rest. We need humanitarian assistance to go in. Working organizations are there from the UN side, but to really have the access is difficult. And on all these fronts, we're trying to be active. Our state minister just traveled to Sudan as the first Western politicians in years to have talks. And she was able to talk to General Beutin. She was able to visit some situations on the ground. State Minister of Germany, of the Foreign Office, Sarah Güler. This is a few weeks ago. So we're taking up, the talks, as difficult as this is. We've also been very active on the humanitarian side. There have been conferences, one I think in April, on Sudan that we co-hosted. It took place in London. Just this year, I think we've expended about 140 million, a little more, euros on humanitarian assistance to Sudan. And the third thing really that we need to do is in the mid term and longer run is accountability for these crimes that are being committed. We've been pushing for an investigation in Geneva and the Human Rights Council to have an investigation commission that looks at these things. So on all these fronts, we need more, and we want to be engaged there, and we have been.
Syria. Some observers are arguing that Syria, under the presidency of Ahmed al-Shara, can play a part in the fight against Hezbollah after joining the American-led coalition to fight terrorism and ISIS. During the Shara visit to DC, he joined last week. Do you see a logic to this argument?
Well, first of all, let me say we welcomed about a year ago the change in Syria, the change that Assad was pushed out, that there's a new government, because there's hope now for Syria overall and for the Syrian people, and we want to be supportive of that. There are many questions, so we're supportive, and we have questions and requests of the Syrian government. We can talk about that if you want to, but overall it is a very good development. We also welcome very much what you just mentioned, that the Syrian government has joined this alliance to fight ISIS. We think it's a step in the right direction. Now, there are many open questions of security for Syria, for the region overall. I don't want to get into the details regarding fighting Hezbollah, but I think it is good that the Syrian government, as it stands now, is engaged in these talks and shows it wants to change the situation on the ground, including for its own people.
On November 5th, the Chancellor Merz invited Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara to visit Berlin, preceded by an official visit by his Foreign Minister Asad al-Shaybani. When do you think this visit will take place, and what would be the main points you would raise with him to discuss?
I don't have a concrete date to give you yet. I don't know if this is confirmed, but the invitation stands, and it's testimony to the fact that we want to support Syria. Just what I mentioned.
Yes.
You know, we think it is a very good development. We think there's lots of hope and chance in that we have a new Syrian government, but we have requests as well, which go to, for example, the inclusiveness of society in Syria, with the different groups of the population that need to be included in governing the country, including women, of course. That is an issue. So it will be talks about the situation on the ground in Syria, as I imagine it.
Return of refugees.
You know, we have a large group of Syrians living in Germany, about 1.3 million with Syrian background, let's say. It's not all refugees. At the end of last year, that's about the number. A lot of them have German citizenship as well.
Yeah, I understand.
And the question of migratory flows and of return is there. It's in the political realm in Germany. And of course, we have cases of criminal behavior where we have a clear request that the Syrian government would be forthcoming and accepting
their own
people
citizens.
back.
Yes.
But overall, just let me underline, this is a very good development, and I'm hopeful that these talks can happen and that the invitation is accepted.
Time's caught up with us. My last question to you is about Ukraine. There's a U.S. plan amended by the EU. Ukraine, we understand this week, has accepted the plan. How does Germany feel, your government feel, about the chances of success for this plan?
Well, we very much hope for success, because the war has been ongoing for years now, and the Russian aggression is not getting smaller. To the contrary. It is unacceptable. It is right there in Europe. It affects the whole world, really, but it definitely affects Ukraine, as you can tell every day. People are, affected by bombings every night, but it affects European security. So we have a very large interest in solving this conflict, and we welcome very much that the Americans are taking the initiative here. We have points to make, because it's about Ukrainian security and our security, and we need to be involved in the talks. And I think this is what the proposals that we've made are about. I can't tell you where this stands in high-level talks between capitals, but we're hopeful that this step by step will lead to concrete steps that actually lead first to a quelling of the violence, so that we don't have any fighting anymore, and then talks about how this conflict overall can be solved.
Ambassador Riclef, Beutin, Germany, permanent representative to the United Nations, we thank you for this interview, and we thank you for your insight, and we wish you the very best of luck in New York. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you for having me.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.